have sex, it feels amazing, and then you sober up, you come down, and you're like, oh, I need more sex. I need more sex. Always, just non-stop. You just want more and more and more because it's so amazing and it feels so good. And it just turned me into a mindless slave. That's all I could think about. That's all that I cared about.
And some, or quite a few audience also ask about the sexual drive. How can they control that and minimize the sexual drive that kind of controlling them? How do you have any advice for them?
Well, I think it really depends on whether or not you really want to. So for me, I've had sex, I've been there, and I've had those experiences, and I've found that it was ultimately unsatisfying. So for me, sex, it always turned me into a slave. You have sex, it feels amazing, and then you sober up, you come down, and you're like, oh, I need more sex. I need more sex. Always, just non-stop. You just want more and more and more because it's so amazing and it feels so good. And it just turned me into a mindless slave. That's all I could think about. That's all that I cared about. And whilst I was in it, I didn't want it to stop. I wanted it to keep going. I didn't want to, control that sexual desire. I just wanted to consume more and more and more and more. But ultimately, after having become a monk, you recognize just how unsatisfactory it actually is. It leads to sex. For me personally, I feel like it leads to suffering because you have it, it feels good, then you come down, and when you're not having it, you want more of it. And in that state of like, oh, I want more of it, in that craving, you're suffering because you're creating a resistance to the way in which things are in the present moment when you don't have what you want. And for me, that was a very painful way to live my life because I spent a lot of time not having what I wanted, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
it was very, very frustrating. And I thought that, okay, I started to see very clearly how the whole phenomenon of sexual desire was actually sort of like a self-made prison, I suppose you could say. The whole sexual desire was it was a very, very dangerous defilement of the mind that just kept me in this perpetual state of craving, of suffering. So practicing meditation has shown me, it's given me a great deal of wisdom. It's helped me to see that sexual gratification has never actually given me what it was that I've been looking for my entire life, and therefore is not actually worth having. Now, a lot of people aren't necessarily going to agree with this, and that's totally fine. This is just me personally in my experience, and what I'm looking for is something a little bit more sustainable rather than temporary, extremely temporary sensory gratification. Irrespective of how gratifying it might be, it is only temporary. So for me, that's not satisfactory ultimately. And I realized that also. Now this is just for me. A lot of people aren't going to be able to relate for this, but sex always has a price, always has a cost. To have sex in a sustainable way, you've got to have a job. You've got to have, well, for the most part, you've got to have a job, have to have a house, have to have money. Blah, blah, blah. You have to be playing the society's game to do that, and that was something that I was just fundamentally unwilling to do. So, I realized it's because sexual desire, it still arises for me, of course, but when it does, I look at it and I say, we know that is very expensive. We know the cost of sexual desire, and it's not worth it. For me personally, it inevitably leads to suffering, and to have sex in a sustainable kind of way, then I would have to give up my freedom, my time and my space freedom, because as monks we can't have sex. And I also recognize that what the Buddha was pointing towards, nirvana, the ultimate truth. To realize this ultimate truth of nirvana, we must let go of our attachments. Nirvana is beyond the senses. So long as we're so plugged into sensory gratification, we don't have a chance to go beyond it. And the Buddha said that there is much more beyond our sense perceptions, our sensory gateways, this experience of nirvana, this transcendent experience beyond sensory gratification. So I have enough faith in the Buddha's teachings to recognize that there is something to what he's saying, absolutely. So I'm willing to forego sexual gratification and sensory gratification to investigate deeply the nature of the Buddha's teachings, because I recognize just how unfulfilling sensual gratification actually is. It's never going to give to me what I want. I know that. I see that very clearly, and it allows me to very easily relinquish it, because what I want craving. I'm looking for something deeper, I suppose, in that sense. So over time, progressively, just through having a strong intention, I've created kind of like a framework to help me deal with sexual desire as I realize just how destructive it is. Through my own experiences, I would highly recommend for anyone who's looking to deal with sexual desire, to sort of go beyond it, to be a little bit more balanced and harmonious and not so destructive in the habit of following sexual desire, to start with a strong intention. Keep it simple. Get clear on your why. Like, why do you want to let go of your sexual desire? What's the reason? Because if you don't have a strong enough reason, then it's very easy to lose your footing. If you don't have a strong enough anchor point, holding you to that particular intent, then you're not going to go very far in trying to relinquish sexual desire. So I think something that can be quite helpful is to know yourself relatively well, know your motives, know your why, and so long as the intention remains strong, just stay with it every single day and let it evolve and grow organically. So for me, I never really forced it. It came about very naturally for me, just based on the way in which I knew myself to be and what my priorities in this life actually are. Yeah, and I think meditation can help us to get quite clear